Hello, once again, and welcome to the section on interpersonal communications. This is part one, and I hope that you'll visit part two when you're done with this one. So, communication and perception. Communication is a process of transmitting information from one person to another or one place to another. Perception is a process by which individuals tend to organize, interpret, and retain information from their environment. People experience stimuli through perceptual filters, that is, the personality, psychology, or experience based differences that influence people to ignore or pay attention to particular stimuli. Selective perception is a tendency to notice and accept objects and information consistent with our values, beliefs, and expectations, while unfortunately ignoring or screening inconsistent information that doesn't agree with what we perceive. Once we have initial information about a person, event, or a process, closure is the tendency to fill in the gaps where information is missing by our assumptions that what we don't know is consistent with what we already know. In other words, we're making assumptions. Perception of others. There's the attribution theory, the theory that we all have a basic need to understand and explain the causes of other people's behavior. Then we have defensive bias, the tendency for people to perceive themselves as personally and situationally similar to someone who is having difficulty or trouble. So we often look at someone and say, well, that's what I do. So we kind of put ourselves in their place. We have a fundamental attribution error, the tendency to ignore external causes of behavior and to attribute other people's actions to internal causes. Then we have self-perception, how we see ourselves. We have a self-serving bias, a tendency to overestimate one's value by attributing successes to oneself and failures to others or the environment that we're in. The communication process begins with an individual wanting to convey a message to an individual or to a group. The next step is then encoding. That's putting a message into written, verbal, or symbolic form that can be recognized and understood by the receiver, hopefully. The message is then transmitted, whether you do it verbally or by phone or by email or text. The message is then decoded by the receiver, and that's the process in which the receiver translates the written, verbal, or symbolic form of message into an understandable message. But beware that it all depends on what their mood is. If they're in a great mood, they'll receive it one way. If they're not in such a good mood, they receive it a different way. The last step is a feedback to the sender, a return message to the sender that indicates the receiver understands the message, or doesn't understand in some cases. When you send messages, you want to plan the message. Don't just do it right off the cuff without any thought behind it. What's the goal of the message? Who should receive it? How should the message be sent? Verbally, email, text? When should it be sent? And where should it be sent? Face-to-face messages are probably the best. And the steps for that is develop a rapport, putting the receiver at ease, state your objective, define your purpose and the end result that you're looking for, and then transmit your message, conveying your message calmly, very important, calmly and clearly. Check the receiver's understanding. Ask, are there any questions, or do you understand what I just said? Get a commitment and follow-up. Make sure the receiver can complete on time and has the ability to do so. Now, checking understanding. It's important that you try to get some feedback. But what is feedback? It's information that verifies the message that you sent. What is paraphrasing? This is a wonderful process. This is a process of having the receiver restate the message in their words. So in other words, do you understand what I said? Can you tell me what I just said? Feedback problems. Well, sometimes receivers feel ignorant. They're afraid to clarify. They're afraid they may not have understood. They may not understand. The language may be too technical, so that's why I say watch using big words. Talk in common everyday language. Receivers are also reluctant to point out the sender's ignorance, afraid to point out that the message is incorrect or unclear. How to get feedback? Well, first of all, you have to be open to it. There are no dumb questions. Be aware of the person's nonverbal communication. Make sure your nonverbal communication encourages that feedback. Ask questions. When you send messages, you should know whether the recipients understand the messages before taking any action. And again, paraphrase. That's the most accurate indicator of understanding, is having them or you paraphrase back to them what you think they said. So let's review. Listening is paying attention, avoiding distractions, stay tuned in, don't assume, don't interrupt, watch their nonverbal behavior, ask questions, take notes if it's appropriate, and convey your understanding. Analyzing, think, and wait to evaluate until after listening, and then check their understanding with either paraphrasing or having them repeat it back to you. Watch for their nonverbal behavior. Nonverbal communication is really an important thing. It's communicating without words, and it includes kinesics, the movements of the body and the face, the body language, facial expressions, gestures, posture, vocal quality, vocal tone as far as loud or quiet and calm, and paralanguage, the pitch, rate, tone, volume, and speaking patterns of one's voice. So, nonverbal messages can be sent by your eyes. People, if they don't like what they're saying, will tend to roll their eyes. Their facial expressions, you should be able to tell whether they're receptive or not receptive to what you're saying. Their body position, their gestures, their voice tone, their dress and appearance. And let's talk about communicating through the eyes. Strong eye contact is important, and it usually indicates your interest, your receptiveness, and your willingness to cooperate. Avoiding direct eye contact communicates an uncomfortable manner to the recipient. It's submissive. It might show that you're bored or distracted and inattentive. Your facial expressions are important. Tense facial muscles show anger or stress over the current situation. Relaxed expression and smiles means they're comfortable and their interest in what's being said to them. Blank expressions might convey confusion, doubt, or they're bored. And phony smiles, they're skeptical. They're not really supporting you. The body position is also important. Sitting on the edge of the chair, body leaning forward, they're receptive to discussion. If they're leaning back in the chair or the body's turned slightly away from you, there's low interest in the discussion. It implies a position of strength or dominance in the meeting. And they might be comfortable interest in what's being discussed. Folded arms and crossed legs usually means they disagree or they are closed-minded to what you have to say. And relaxed arms obviously shows an openness to discussion. Through gestures, clenched of fidgety hands means that they're tense or have anxiousness. Their hands are and expressions are fairly still. Relaxed hand movements, that means they're comfortable and at ease. Strong, quick movements of the hands and arms are emphasizing points or, I add, upset with a point or discussion. Communicating through your voice. Voice discloses the true feelings through your volume, pitch, and rate. If I talk real hard like this, it means that I'm angry or up-tensed. But if I'm talking very comfortably like this, it means I'm calm. The pitch shows natural highs and lows of the voice, and it varies with the different things that are being said because it illustrates either enthusiasm or excitement. Monotonous tone illustrates little interest or boredom with your discussion. Volume of the voice, speaking powerfully or loudly, wants their ideas to be heard. They feel very strongly about what they're saying and may also try to assert some dominance. A quiet voice means they're uncomfortable sharing their opinion or reluctant to support a position. And the rate at which they talk, rapid indicates nervousness or excitement, and a slow rate indicates disinterest or maybe boredom with discussion. And it may also indicate a lack of understanding. Now, how do you interpret nonverbal communication? By being aware, you can interpret members' attitudes and the potential problems, their feelings of separation, confusion, or power struggles, and I add again, boredom. They might have anger or disagreement. Improving your interpret skills. To improve ability to interpret, you need to be aware of inconsistencies. Avoid jumping to any conclusions. Just observe and feel what you think is happening. Ask for clarification if needed. Be aware of inconsistencies. If verbal and nonverbal contradict one another, they're not being very truthful. So if they're saying one way but looking another way, they're not being honest with you. Being sensitive will help you detect a potential problem and prevent disrupting a meeting. Avoid jumping to conclusions. Sometimes nonverbal communication could be misleading, so don't just assume because you think you see something. Weigh out the entire environment. A furrowed brow and clenched hands might mean they're angry at a member or stressed about an upcoming project. Ask for clarification. If in doubt about a true opinion, ask them to clarify their feelings. What do you really feel? If the verbal and nonverbal communication contradict each other, inform them and ask them if there is a problem. If they sound like they're agreeing but they don't look like it, ask them to clarify. Some self-improvement tips. To be an effective meeting leader, not only should you be aware of your participants, you should also be aware of your own verbal and nonverbal habits. 3 simple steps. Be consistent with your verbal and nonverbal communication. It needs to match what you're saying. Be aware of how others react to your message. Adjust yourself to what you see going on around you. And solicit feedback about your nonverbal tendencies. We hope you'll take time to visit part 2 of this series. Thank you and have a good day.